Well, that was awesome. And that was a great way to cover up the fact that I made a mistake, because there was supposed to be a scripture reading. Yeah, way to smile and acknowledge that I made the mistake. But you know what? It's going to fit in really well with what I'm talking about today, so I'm happy with making a mistake. Actually, I'm not happy, but I did make one. I will say this, as I always listen to you all, I'm just so grateful, and I love when there's different faces and stuff. You know, one of the things that's true about our church that we don't say perhaps often enough is our ministry is really open to you. If there's something you want to be a part of, if you see or hear the choir and you go, hey, I'd like to be a part of that, then you should be a part of that. If you see the bells playing and you want to ring bells, you should be a part of that. If you hear of things that we're doing, we are trying to find better ways to make sure people have access, invitations, sort of on-ramps into ministry. If you want to be a part of our tech support team, we'd love to have you as a part of that. If you all of a sudden are a Grammy-nominated musician, we'd love to have you lead in worship. And if you're not a Grammy-nominated musician, we still want to talk to you. But we just want you to find ways to get connected and utilize the gifts that we know God has given you within the context of our ministry or within our larger community as we seek to serve and make a difference. You know, some of you may know that one of my favorite phrases is, two things can be equally true. I say it pretty often. It's something that I remind myself of regularly. Two things can be equally true. It sort of comes from Plato and Socrates, Aristotle, the Greek philosophical conversations of the day that sort of, I believe, pushes against what is the all too pervasive tendency of humanity to sort of succumb to this dualistic binary way of thinking. So oftentimes we create this sort of inside-outside either-or paradigm of thinking that really becomes divisive and harmful, not just in our lives, not just in our faith, but in our culture, in our world. I think we're seeing that right now. And for me, two things can be equally true is a way of reminding myself and us that we shouldn't be so dualistic and binary at times in how we think in general, but especially how we think about God. It's going to be relevant this morning because that idea of two things being equally true is profoundly relevant this morning as we look at Jesus and recognize the phrase that many of us have said in our lives about Jesus: fully human, fully divine. Right? Anybody familiar? You know, we've affirmed that Jesus is fully human, fully divine. And we believe that. We say that. And I think that we are quite familiar with, and maybe even a little more comfortable with, the aspects of the fully divine Jesus that we hear talked about a lot in church. The fully divine part we get, the miracles, the healing, the resurrection, all that stuff. We hear about that a lot. But what does it mean? What does it mean really for us to affirm the full humanity of Jesus? You know, that question has really been the source of a great many debates, a lot of disagreements. A few heresies have been sort of revealed as people have considered what it means for Jesus to be fully human and fully divine. And we're looking at that within the context of this sermon series that we're in called Copy and Paste. Right? Coming out of Easter, we really wanted to intentionally dig deeper into who Jesus is, the characteristics that Jesus embodied, not this sort of domesticated presentation of Jesus that too often times we're given, but really dig deeper into who he was, how he lived, the characteristics that he calls us not to just worship, but to embody, right? To look at who he was, to copy that, and to paste it into who we are and how we live our lives and how we practice our faith. And so this morning, we're going to be talking about this idea that Jesus was a learner, that Jesus was open to learning. And as we do that, we're going to come to terms with this theological concept, this idea of the hypostatic union. I was saying this morning that Dania gets all giddy when I say hypostatic union, right? Because kind of we theologian, Josh, we all kind of geek out on some of this stuff. But the hypostatic union is this theological doctrine that affirms and articulates that Jesus was fully human and fully divine. right? And it kind of gets its origin from, again, a Greek word, hypostasis, which is a word that talks about denoting an actual concrete existence or the substance of something. It was a term that was used in Greek philosophy about the actual concrete existence of something. And so the hypostatic union in the early church was this way of articulating the actual concrete existence of the full divinity of Jesus and the actual concrete existence of the full humanity of Jesus. And this was articulated at the Council of Chalcedon in the 5th century as the early church was really trying to wrestle with and communicate, articulate what it understood to be true about God, what it understood to be true about the gospel and about Jesus. And so that hypostatic union, that Council of Chalcedon, was oftentimes the case. These councils were a reaction to what was going on in the culture. And Arianism was a belief in the church that Jesus was sort of God and sort of human, right? That he wasn't fully one or fully the other. It was sort of this compromise position that was starting to become really pervasive in the church. And so the church felt the need to say that that's not accurate. There's flaws in that theological affirmation, which then leads to fully human, fully divine, hypostatic union, which for us is like many things in faith, it's sort of this both and approach. Two things can be equally true, even though those two things can be hard to kind of wrestle with in our minds, right? And so Jesus, what we affirm in that is that Jesus was never less than God and never more than human. But again, we tend to focus on the God part of Jesus rather than the human part. And I want us to think about that as we look at this passage this morning from Matthew chapter 8, as we consider what it means that Jesus learns even as he lives. And so Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 13, we open ourselves to what God has to say in this passage. And so if you brought your Bible, you can turn to Matthew 8. If you want to read the Bible that's there in front of you, if you want to watch or listen, let's hear what God has to say to us this morning. When Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion, a Roman soldier, came to him appealing to Jesus and saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed in terrible distress." And Jesus said to him, "I will come and cure him." And then the centurion answered, "Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only speak the word and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes. And to my slave I say, 'Do this,' and the slave does it." And when Jesus heard him, Jesus was amazed and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion, Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you according to your faith." And the servant was healed in that hour. Now, I just want to say quickly, last night, we've talked about how this confirmation class met. They shared their statements of faith. We were talking and spending time with one another. It was just a great opportunity to hear the wisdom and the insight that these students offered up. And a part of that, we were talking about the value of questions and how there's a real need for intellectual curiosity as it pertains to faith and really considering things of life and of faith and of Scripture from different points of view and opening ourselves to what it has to say to us. And as we think about that, it's a great connection to what we need to do when we look at this passage, right? Because as we look at this passage, I would suggest that we are not ever going to be able to understand the truth of what it's saying unless we understand that we have probably always read it from an improper translation. And here's what I mean by that. As we look at this, Jesus comes to this town of Capernaum, a centurion, a Roman soldier comes up to him and shares with Jesus that this Roman's servant is ill and asks Jesus to heal him. And Jesus says to him, I will come and cure him. I'll come and heal him. And then the Roman soldier continues to plead with Jesus to come. I'm not worthy of you doing this, but I have authority, and goes into that sort of back and forth about I have authority and I understand what it means to have authority and you have authority. And so there's that exchange that then leads Jesus to be amazed, to be blown away by this centurion's faith. And then even says to those who have been with him for 4 or 5 chapters, I haven't found this kind of faith in any of you. And then he heals the centurion's servant. And in some ways, it can be sort of an odd passage, right? It seems pretty straightforward. It's just another healing. But I've never really quite understood it, because when the Roman soldier asks Jesus to come heal his servant, and Jesus says, I will come and heal him, at that point, you would think the Roman soldier would just go, okay, let's go. So why does he plead with Jesus, sort of begging Jesus to come, right? Why does he say that whole thing about authority? Well, part of the reason, I think actually the reason, is that so oftentimes we miss what is being communicated. It's lost in translation. This centurion, in his pleading, then hears from Jesus in verse 7, in our translation, I will come and cure him. But the Greek is actually written there in a way that the sentence structure of the Greek actually has what Jesus is saying in the indicative and the interrogative form. Right? That's the format that it's written in, which more simply stated means this. What we oftentimes read translated as a statement from Jesus, I will come and cure him, in the Greek is actually written as a question. Am I supposed to come and heal him? It changes everything. Because when it's a question, we now understand why this centurion starts to plead with Jesus to come. Like all of a sudden, the question of Jesus is, am I supposed to come and heal your servant? Right? At this point, Jesus understands his call to be for a particular group of people. And it doesn't occur to Jesus that he would respond to those beyond the bounds of God's people. We're going to see this later in Matthew's gospel. In Matthew 15, the Canaanite woman who begs Jesus to give her even the crumbs that fall off the table. We see it in other places where there are people whose interactions with Jesus expand his awareness and understanding of who he is and who he's for. And here what we find is that this soldier's response expands Jesus' understanding. And the response makes perfect sense. The soldier basically says, look, I have authority because someone who's superior to me has given me the authority to execute orders. So when I say go, they go. When I say come, they say come. And he says, and you have authority, Jesus, that God has given you. Just like I have the authority that's been given to me and people do it, you have authority from God to do what I'm asking you to do. And that blows Jesus away, that this non-Jewish person understands the authority that God has given him. And in that response, Jesus is amazed and takes the opportunity to critique those who have been with him for 5 chapters to say, how come you guys don't get it this well? And then heals ultimately this servant. The centurion's response, the centurion's faith helps Jesus expand his understanding of who he was sent for and what he was meant to do. And in that, I believe we see a critically important part of faith, and that is being open to learning. That if we are going to celebrate the full humanity of Jesus, we celebrate the openness Jesus models and experiences to learning and having his awareness of what God is doing in and through his life expand. Right? This is something that is lost so oftentimes today. We lack so oftentimes in our world, in our culture, in any number of sort of contexts, an openness to learning and having our mind expanded. And in the church, so oftentimes we'd rather shrink God than enlarge God. I was thinking about this as a couple of months ago, I was on a webinar through Lafayette Arenda Presbyterian Church. They had Dr. Larry Toy, who's a retired astronomy professor, And he was talking about science and faith, and he got his undergraduate degree in astronomy from Harvard University. He got his MA and his PhD in astronomy from UC Berkeley, and he was talking about his field and his faith. And one of the things that he said that was so compelling to me was that when he started out at Harvard, he was learning astronomy. He believed, and the general feeling was that they understood 100% of how the universe worked. The matter and everything in the universe, they understood it all. And if not all of it, they understood basically all of it. That was what he was learning. But as he retired some 60 years later, 50 years later, what he came to realize was that now we only understand about 5% of the universe, and 95% is a mystery. With the discovery of dark matter and other things, there's 95% unknown with 5% known. And what he talked about was how in his field and in his faith, there's probably a correlation to being willing to embrace that what we sometimes want to think we understand 100% of, as we open ourselves, we realize we might only understand 5%. And 95% of it is mystery. And that's okay. That's okay. Folks, we are called and created to embrace the fact that we don't understand it all and need to be open to learning what God wants to do in and through our lives. To ask questions, to listen to the pleas of others, the perspectives that can challenge us, the voices that too oftentimes are marginalized, so that our ability to serve God and live out our faith can expand in its understanding, can expand our capacity to have compassion for those we know and those we don't want to get to know. That we might expand our ability to include people in the circle of God's love, to expand our understanding and capacity to be an extension of God's grace at work in the world. See, Jesus was open to learning. Jesus, what we see in his life, was a learner. And my hope and prayer is that we might be those who would copy that quality and paste it into how we live our lives and practice our faith. Amen.